The music stopped mid-beat, and every head in the room turned toward me. The laughter, the chatter, even the clinking glasses froze as if someone had cut the sound. There I was, standing in the middle of my son's wedding, holding the small clutch that carried the $50,000 check I'd written to pay for the entire event. The dress, the flowers, the venue, the food, all of it. And then his fiancée, Lana, pointed at me with that manicured hand and said the words, "I'll never forget. You're not welcome here." Her voice was sharp enough to slice through the air. The band fell silent. Guests looked down at their plates, pretending they hadn't seen what was happening. My son Noah stood beside her, staring at the floor like a stranger who didn't know me. In that moment, everything inside me cracked. I had imagined this day so many times, walking him down the aisle, watching him smile, feeling proud of the man I raised. Instead, I was being thrown out of the celebration I built for them. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I refused to cry. I told myself, don't give them that. Don't let them see you break. I turned and walked toward the exit, my heels echoing across the marble floor. Each step felt heavier than the last. I could almost hear the whispers behind me. Out in the parking lot, I sat in my car for what felt like hours. The air was cold, the silence thicker than any words. My phone buzzed non-stop messages from relatives. "Are you okay? Don't make a scene. Let's talk later." Not one of them asked what had really happened. Not one of them defended me. That's when something inside me shifted. The humiliation hardened into something else, something colder, sharper. I'd spent years writing checks, biting my tongue, keeping the peace, and for what? To be treated like an unwanted guest at my own son's wedding. No more. If I wasn't welcome at that wedding, then neither was my money. I started the car, opened my phone, and scrolled to the contact list. The wedding planner's number glowed back at me. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady when she answered. "Hi, Evelyn. Just finishing the final details for tomorrow," she chirped. "I'm cancelling everything." Silence. Everything, she asked carefully. Yes. The venue, the caterer, the flowers, all of it. Pull the plug. Another pause. "Are you sure that's very last minute?" I looked out into the dark lot, my reflection faint in the windshield. If I'm not invited to my own son's wedding, my money isn't either. And that was that. As I hung up, the shaking stopped, my breathing slowed. It wasn't anger anymore, it was clarity. I went home, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out the neat binder I'd made for them. Every receipt, every contract, every proof that the dream they were living had been built on my back. I dialed the venue next. "This is Evelyn Thompson. I'm the contract holder for the Thompson-Whitaker wedding." They hesitated, polite, but nervous. "You're cancelling, ma'am?" "Yes, effective immediately." I called the florist, the band, the photographer, one by one. Each fell like dominoes. By midnight, the wedding had collapsed before it even began. And sitting there in the quiet of my kitchen, I realized something powerful. They hadn't built a future. They'd built a fantasy paid for by me. They thought kindness was weakness. They were wrong. Tomorrow they'd wake up expecting their fairy tale day. Instead, they'd face the wreckage of their own entitlement. If I wasn't welcome, neither was my money. It was close to midnight when the knocking started. At first it was soft, hesitant, almost apologetic. Then it grew louder, urgent, desperate. Mum opened the door. "We need to talk." I stayed still in my chair, hands folded tightly in my lap. The house was dark except for the faint light coming from the hallway. Outside, I could see the shadow of my son Noah pacing on the porch. His movements were sharp, frantic, the same kind of energy you see in someone who knows they've finally lost control. He banged again, louder this time. Mum, you can't do this. It's our wedding. Our wedding. Those two words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I'd let him call every milestone ours, our family vacation, our house, our holidays. But suddenly it was clear this wasn't ours. It never had been. It was mine. My effort. My money. My trust. So I didn't move. I let him stand there, sweating in his suit, demanding answers he no longer deserved. The phone buzzed on the table beside me, lighting up the dark room. Text after text appeared in a blur. Why aren't you answering? You're ruining our lives. How could you be so selfish? The irony made me laugh under my breath. Selfish. That word again. It's the one people love to throw at you when you finally stop letting them take advantage of you. Outside, Noah's voice cracked through the night again. Mum, please, just talk to me. I wanted to. A small motherly part of me wanted to fling open the door, hold his face and tell him that everything would be okay, that I'd fix it like I always did. But I'd spent 30 years cleaning up everyone else's messes, soothing egos, covering bills, and swallowing pain to keep the peace. And what had it earned me? A son who stood silent while his bride humiliated me. So no, not this time. The knocking slowed, then stopped. I heard his footsteps fade toward the driveway, the engine of his car roaring to life before silence filled the house again. I sat there for a moment, breathing in the stillness. It wasn't peace exactly, but something close to it. A strange, powerful quiet that made me feel taller somehow. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. The phone lit up again. Another call. I stared at Noah's name on the screen, the same name I'd written on school forms and birthday cards for decades. I pressed accept. His voice came fast and furious. Mum, what the hell are you doing? You can't just cancel everything. I stayed calm. You stood there while she threw me out. Noah, you didn't say a word. I didn't want to make things worse, he snapped. Oh, but it was fine for her to make a scene. Silence stretched between us. I could almost hear his anger breaking into something smaller. Fear, maybe. Then came the same excuses I'd heard my whole life. She didn't mean it. She was stressed. You're overreacting. Overreacting. That word again. The one people use to make women doubt their own pain. No, I said quietly. I'm not overreacting. I'm finished. Mum, you can't do this, he said again. But his voice had lost its edge. Emma's in tears. She's devastated. She should have thought about that before she threw me out of my own event, I replied. A sharp silence followed. Then he muttered, You're ruining everything. I almost laughed. No, Noah. I just stopped paying for it. I ended the call before he could respond. My hands were steady now. The house was still the night air, cool and heavy. For years I had begged for their respect. Tonight I earned it not through words, but through silence. That silence was louder than any argument, more powerful than any speech. It was the sound of a woman finally reclaiming her dignity. And as the phone buzzed again and again, I let it ring. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all. The pounding started early, just as the first light crept through my kitchen blinds. I hadn't slept much. The house felt heavier than usual, the kind of quiet that hums after a storm, but before another one starts. My coffee sat cold on the counter when the knocking began again. Mum, open up. We need to talk. This time I opened the door. Noah stood there, eyes bloodshot. Hair a mess, still in the same wrinkled shirt from the night before. He didn't wait for an invitation. He stormed in his voice already raised. What the hell, Mum? You destroyed everything. Do you even care what you've done to us? I didn't flinch. I'd spent years shrinking under that tone, the same frustrated pitch he used as a teenager whenever I told him no. I wasn't that woman anymore. Lower your voice, I said calmly. You're in my house. He paced back and forth, hands running through his hair, a nervous habit he'd picked up from his father. The venue says it's been rebooked. The florist won't answer. The caterer's out. The band cancelled. Everything's gone. Yes, I said evenly, because I stopped paying for my own humiliation. He froze. Humiliation? You think this is about you? Emma was upset. You embarrassed her in front of everyone. I embarrassed her, I asked quietly. She threw me out of my own event, Noah. She told me I wasn't welcome. In front of our family. Our friends. You just stood there. His jaw tightened. I was trying not to make it worse. By saying nothing, I shot back. By letting her treat me like I didn't matter. He looked away, muttering something I almost didn't catch. You've always been like this. Controlling. Selfish. This is why Dad left. The words hit hard like a slap I didn't see coming. For a moment, my throat closed, but I forced myself to breathe. The old me would have broken down right there. The new me didn't. Selfish. I repeated, my voice trembling not from fear, but from fury contained too long. Do you have any idea what I've given up for you? The hours I worked, the things I sold, the dreams I shelved so you could have yours. He didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at the floor. His face a mix of guilt and pride, the two things that never live comfortably together. I stepped closer, my tone steady now. You chose her over me. That's fine. You're a grown man. But if you want her, then let her pay for what she wants. His mouth opened as if to argue, but no words came. I walked to the door and held it open. You should go. He hesitated for a long second, eyes flickering like he wanted to apologize but couldn't bring himself to say it. Then he left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the walls. When the echo faded, I stood there, hands shaking. I wasn't sure if it was anger or relief, maybe both. For the first time in years, I had told him no, and meant it. That's the thing about boundaries. Once you draw them, people who benefited from your silence will call you difficult, ungrateful, cruel. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you've finally stopped being convenient. By noon, my phone started buzzing again. First, it was my sister-in-law, then my ex-husband Richard. Each one with the same tone, the half-pity, half-blame people use when they want you to cave. Evelyn. I heard what happened. My sister-in-law began carefully. He's devastated. You've got to fix this, reinstate the payments. They're young, they made a mistake. I didn't ruin anything, I told her quietly. They did the moment they treated me like a stranger. Then came Richard's voice, smooth and clipped as always. Evelyn, don't make this about old wounds. Just let them have their day. Be the bigger person. Be the bigger person. The same line I'd heard my whole life, the one that always meant keep paying and keep quiet. I hung up mid-sentence. The house went still again. Sunlight spilling across the kitchen table. I looked around at the life I'd built, at every framed photo, every quiet proof of how much I'd loved and how much I'd given. And in that moment, I realized something simple but powerful. I was done being the bigger person. Being the bigger person had cost me too much. My voice, my dignity, my peace. They wanted to see how far I'd bend. They finally learned how far I'd snap. I poured out the cold coffee, washed the mug, and let the water run until it turned hot again. Sometimes healing doesn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like closing your door, turning off your phone, and letting silence speak for you. Outside, the world went on as usual. Inside, I felt lighter. For once, I wasn't fixing anyone's mess. I was saving myself from one. The next morning, I sat in the waiting area of Margaret Lynn's office, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm tea. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, hitting the polished floor in quiet stripes. I'd been here before over the years for wills, property documents, tax matters. But this visit felt different. This time I wasn't there to protect assets. I was there to protect myself. When Margaret walked in, her usual calm filled the room. She was one of those people who could command attention without raising her voice. Sharp eyes, soft tone. Everything about her said, "You're safe now." "Evelyn," she said, smiling gently as we shook hands. "You look tired. Tell me what's been going on." So I did. From the beginning, the rehearsal dinner, Lana's outburst, Noah's silence, the humiliation that cracked something inside me, the sleepless night, the cancellations, and the phone calls that followed. I laid it all out, every ugly detail, like peeling off a bandage that had been stuck too long. Margaret listened the way few people know how, without interrupting, without judgment, just taking it all in. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen thoughtfully against a legal pad. "Let me be perfectly clear," she said finally. "You've done absolutely nothing wrong." Her words hit me like a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. She continued, "Every contract is in your name. Every payment came from your account. You are the sole client, which means you have the full right to cancel everything. Legally, ethically, financially, you're on solid ground." I blinked, letting that sink in, after days of being blamed, accused, and guilt-tripped. Someone was finally saying what I needed to hear. You were right to stand up for yourself. What if they try to sue me? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Margaret's lips curved into a small, confident smile. Sue you? For cancelling your own contracts? They don't have a leg to stand on. And if they or their lawyer try anything, you send it to me. I'll handle it. Her certainty was like a blanket around my shoulders. She reached into a folder and slid a stack of papers toward me. I'll draft formal notices to every vendor confirming the cancellations and reaffirming your legal authority. No one can reverse these decisions without your written consent. I nodded, my fingers tightening around the pen she handed me. For the first time in days, my hand didn't shake as I signed. As she reviewed the signatures, I noticed how steady my breathing had become. The anger that had once felt like fire now felt like focus. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming control, about closing a chapter that should have ended years ago. Margaret glanced up from the documents. Evelyn, this is exactly what you should have done. People often think being kind means being a doormat. It doesn't. It means knowing when to stop letting others wipe their feet on you. I felt my throat tighten, not from sadness, but from relief. For once, someone wasn't asking me to be the bigger person. She was reminding me that I already was, just not in the way they defined it. Before I could respond, there was a soft knock on the office door. Margaret's assistant poked her head in, looking slightly uneasy. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a call on line 2. He says it's urgent. A man named Noah." For a moment, the room seemed to still. My pulse quickened, but I didn't move. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Do you want to take it?" I stared at the blinking line on her phone. My son's name, the same son who had stood there in silence while I was humiliated, the same voice that had called me selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. "No," I said quietly. Not now. Margaret nodded approvingly. Good. Let him wait. You've carried him long enough. It's his turn to stand on his own. I smiled faintly, the tension in my chest finally easing. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't reacting to chaos. I was choosing peace. Margaret began gathering the papers into a neat pile. I'll send out the notices today and copy you on every email. If they contact you, don't engage. Redirect it all here. I stood to leave, feeling lighter than when I'd arrived. The fear that once gripped me had turned into something else. Clarity. Maybe even strength. As I reached the door, my phone buzzed again. Noah's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring until it stopped. Some lessons can't be taught through words. Some people only understand silence. And as I stepped into the sunlight, I knew that silence was finally mine. That evening, after leaving Margaret's office, I finally thought the storm might be passing. But peace doesn't last long in the digital age. By the time I got home, my phone was already buzzing with notifications, texts, tags, and calls from numbers I didn't recognize. At first, I ignored them. I made myself a cup of tea, changed into my robe, and sat down by the window. The air outside was still. For the first time in days, I could almost hear my own thoughts. Then my phone lit up again this time, with a message from an old coworker. Hey Evelyn, is this about you? Attached was a link to Facebook. I clicked before I could stop myself. There she was. Lana, sitting in front of a camera, eyes red makeup, smudged just enough to look tragic. Her voice cracked as she spoke, trembling for the perfect dramatic effect. I never thought my future mother-in-law would destroy our wedding out of jealousy and spite, she said between sniffles. We worked so hard to make this day special. But she cancelled everything. The venue, the flowers, the food, everything we planned for months. Gone. Behind her, soft piano music played. She dabbed her tears, pausing just long enough to let the comments flood in. And they did. Hundreds of them. Wow. What kind of mother does that poor thing stay strong? She sounds toxic. I stared at the screen, feeling something hot rise in my chest. Not the wild, unfiltered rage I might have felt years ago, but something quieter, colder. The kind of anger that doesn't shout, it plans. Scrolling further, I found an Instagram post of her and Noah embracing under a filtered sunset. The caption read, "We won't let hate win. Family should lift you up, not tear you down." Hundreds of likes, hearts, and comments. I sat there in silence, letting it all sink in. They were rewriting the story, turning me from the woman who paid for everything into the villain who destroyed it all. It was almost impressive how quickly people believe the prettier version of a lie. I could have gone online to defend myself. I could have commented, posted receipts, told the world how every check, every contract, every dime came from my account. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I opened my notes app and started writing. Names, dates, quotes, screenshots, every post, every comment, every lie. One by one, I saved them all, labeling a folder evidence. Margaret had taught me something that morning: don't fight chaos emotionally. Fight it with precision. By midnight, I had over 40 screenshots saved. My hands trembled not from sadness, but from focus. I wasn't going to argue in public. I was going to let proof do the talking. When people try to manipulate a story, they forget that the truth has its own gravity. You don't have to chase it. It always finds its way back to the surface. I was about to close my laptop when a new email notification popped up on the screen. The subject line read, "Payment Confirmation. Maldives Honeymoon Package." For a second, I froze, thinking it was spam. But then I saw the sender's address, my name, my email. I clicked it open. Thank you for booking your 14-night stay at the Ocean Pearl Villa Maldives. Charges have been applied to your American Express, ending in 3921. My credit card. My blood ran cold. Attached was a receipt for $26,000, complete with champagne service, a private yacht excursion, and a note that said, "Congratulations to our guests, Noah and Lana." It was dated 3 weeks ago, right around the time Lana had asked me to meet for coffee to discuss floral arrangements. That wasn't a meeting. It was a distraction. While I was choosing roses, she was charging a luxury honeymoon to my card. I scrolled further down the inbox. More transactions, designer luggage, spa packages, private chef deposits. Every line of text felt like another knife twisting deeper. All the humiliation, all the gaslighting, all the guilt, they suddenly made sense. This wasn't just about disrespect. It was about using me, and they'd done it with a smile. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the screen reflecting off my tea that had long gone cold. The anger inside me didn't explode this time, it crystallized into something sharper. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. They thought they could take everything from me, my money, my dignity, my story, and still walk away looking like victims. But I had the receipts, literally. I opened my folder labeled Evidence and added the new emails. Then I closed my laptop, took a slow breath, and whispered to myself, let's see how deep this goes. Because if they wanted a war, they had just started one. And this time, I wouldn't fight it with tears. I'd fight it with facts. Margaret didn't blink when I handed her the folder. She flipped through the pages, emails, receipts, screenshots, credit card statements, each one a little accusation in ink. She set the stack down and looked at me with that same steady calm she always has. Good. This is exactly what we need, she said. Her voice was businesslike, not triumphant. That steadiness felt like an anchor. We went through everything methodically. Dates, merchant names, the exact charge descriptions, the Maldives booking the designer purchases, the spa invoices, the chef deposit. Margaret annotated as she read, circling items, jotting notes. She explained in plain English what each piece meant for our case. You have 2 tracks here, she said, civil and criminal. Financial misuse of your card can be both theft and fraud. We'll draft a cease and desist for the harassment and defamation. At the same time, I'll instruct your bank to investigate unauthorized charges. If the charges were made without your consent, we can get them reversed. If not, we have a clear paper trail that shows intent. The word intent landed hard. It's what separates an honest mistake from a planned betrayal. Margaret prepared the cease and desist that afternoon. It named Lana and Noah and set out the conduct that must stop public defamation, harassment, and the unauthorized use of Evelyn's accounts. She had me sign it, then she mailed certified copies, emailed them to the parties and their parents, and sent notices to the vendors. Every communication was logged and time-stamped. No drama, no public spectacle, just precise legal pressure. Next, she called the bank. I watched her on the speakerphone as she patiently, firmly explained the situation. Within hours, a freeze was placed on the college account Noah had been dipping into, the one he'd kept from when he was a student. Margaret had the bank flag any further withdrawals and begin a formal fraud inquiry. She also instructed the credit card company to investigate the specific charges and to put a temporary dispute on the large Maldives payment. It felt strange at first, stranger, and better than the frantic, pleading energy I'd felt trying to reason with people who wouldn't listen. This was action that mattered, paperwork process timelines. Not outrage posted online, not frantic texts at 3 a.m. Real steps that could actually change things. Margaret was clear about boundaries too. If they try to bring a lawsuit claiming you ruined the wedding, we'll file a declaratory judgment or a quick motion to dismiss based on the contracts. You are the client on those agreements. They don't have standing to force the vendors to reinstate services under your name without your consent. And any attempt to harass you or publish false claims will be met with a response. As the day went on, the pile of evidence became less like bruises and more like armor. Each email I'd saved was a brick in a wall I was building around myself. I felt my breathing slow. The adrenaline that had kept me wired for days finally softened into something steadier, confidence maybe, or relief. By evening, the cease and desist letters had been sent. The bank had begun its investigation. Margaret told me she'd be the point of contact for any lawyers who called. If Noah or Lana wanted to argue, they would be talking to her, not to me. She looked at me, eyes kind but firm. "You did the right thing," she said. "People conflate kindness with weakness. You used your kindness to lift them and they abused that. Now you're using the correct tools to stop it. That's not vindictive. It's protective." I wanted to say that I didn't seek to ruin anyone's life. I only wanted boundaries and accountability. Margaret nodded as if she'd heard that 100 times. "Boundaries are not punishments," she said. "They're instruction for how other people should treat you." That night, for the first time since the rehearsal, I slept. It wasn't a triumphant, gloating sleep. It was the kind that comes after you've done what you needed to do and can finally stop running. In the weeks that followed, the dominoes fell quietly. Vendors confirmed cancellations. Some attempted to be neutral. Others admitted in private that they'd been surprised by who the real contract holder was. The bank reversed a few charges and placed holds where necessary. The social narrative shifted too slowly and messily as facts emerged, and screenshots of receipts circulated in the right places. People you thought would never understand began to see the pattern. Best of all, I learned practical things I wish I had known earlier. Document everything. Save every message. Use certified mail for serious notices. Put legal counsel as the point of contact if things escalate. Contact your bank immediately when you spot questionable activity. And don't engage in public debates. Let facts and counsel handle it. The point wasn't to humiliate my son or his bride. It was to make them responsible for their choices. If they wanted their wedding, they could fund it themselves. I had given enough. I wasn't a piggy bank. I was a person. When the dust settled, no one could claim I'd acted out of spite. I'd acted out of preservation. The wedding, if it happened at all, would be on their dime. And that was the simplest lesson. Kindness is a gift, not an obligation. They would have to pay for their own dream. By the following week, the final domino fell quietly. No explosion, no confrontation. Just a short, polite email from the wedding venue. "Dear Mrs. Thompson," it began, "as per your cancellation request. The reservation for the Thompson-Reed wedding has been officially removed from our schedule. Please note the date has now been rebooked by another client." I read it twice, then smiled to myself. That was it. The castle they built on my money and arrogance was gone. Signed away, replaced and forgotten by the venue staff who'd once gushed over the happy couple. For a long moment, I stared at the screen, imagining Lana's face, when she found out that the date she'd posted all over Instagram, the one tied to her custom invitations and embroidered robes, now belonged to someone else. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't even feel triumphant. I just felt done. Later that evening, another email arrived. This one from Noah. The subject line alone made my jaw tighten. "Let's move forward." It was written like a PR statement full of hollow apologies and subtle condescension. "Mum, we've talked it over," he wrote. "We've decided to forgive you for everything that's happened. We understand emotions were high, and things were said that shouldn't have been. If you can behave and not make things awkward, we're willing to let you come to the wedding. This is our day, and we'd appreciate it if you didn't make it about you. I stared at the words, reading them slowly, almost disbelieving. Forgive me. Forgive me for funding their dream, for being humiliated in public, for cancelling what I had paid for. And they were willing to let me come as long as I behaved. I didn't laugh at first, but then it came soft, then louder, until I was clutching my sides. Not the kind of laughter that's joyful, but the kind that comes when absurdity finally tips into clarity. I'd spent most of my adult life cleaning up other people's messes, paying bills, smoothing arguments, saying it's fine when it wasn't. But this email was the final confirmation that I owed them nothing anymore. I closed my laptop without replying. Let them think what they wanted. Silence was its own kind of power, and I had finally learned how to use it. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen counter. It was supposed to be their wedding day, the one that never happened. I poured myself a cup of coffee, looked out the window, and decided to do something different. Instead of driving to a venue filled with tension and fake smiles, I drove to the spa, 2 towns over, the one with eucalyptus steam rooms and ocean blue towels, so soft they felt unreal. By noon, I was sitting on a lounge chair robe wrapped around me, a cool glass of champagne in hand. The air smelled of lavender and sea salt. My phone buzzed once, twice, then went still. I didn't bother turning it over. At exactly 2 p.m., the time the ceremony should have begun, I closed my eyes and imagined the scene. The empty venue, the frantic phone calls, the realization hitting them that every deposit, every signature, every detail had been under my name, not theirs. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to fix anything. I didn't feel guilty or sad. I just felt light. That's what happens when you finally stop begging for love that has conditions. When you stop explaining your worth to people who already decided it was transactional. The truth is, peace doesn't always come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from letting go so completely that their noise can't reach you anymore. As I sipped my drink, the spa attendant brought me a small fruit platter. I smiled, thanked her, and took a photo of the sunlight hitting my glass. The caption I typed was simple. Best decision I ever made. No names, no explanations. But I knew they'd see it, and they'd know exactly what it meant. That moment wasn't about revenge, it was about freedom. Because the greatest satisfaction isn't watching others fall, it's realizing you no longer need them to rise. It started quietly, like a whisper at the edge of town. A single comment under one of Lana's tearful posts. Didn't Evelyn pay for the entire wedding? This doesn't add up. At first, her friends defended her fiercely. Don't spread lies, they snapped. You don't know the full story. But within hours, screenshots began to appear. Payment confirmations, invoices, contracts, all with my name on them. Someone from the venue leaked the truth. Every bill had been covered by me. The honeymoon booking under my credit card number was the final spark. That detail spread faster than gossip at a church potluck. Wedding forums, bridal Facebook groups, even Reddit threads began dissecting the drama. And for once, the comments weren't against me. One post went viral. If you can't afford your own wedding, maybe don't humiliate the person who paid for it. Another person chimed in. Imagine biting the hand that literally fed your fantasy wedding. Even the tone shifted from pitying Lana to calling her out. Strangers debated the story like a morality play. Was it entitlement? Was it greed? Or was it something deeper? A cultural script that expects parents, especially mothers, to keep giving long after love stops being mutual. The phrase that kept popping up again and again was simple but sharp. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. Then came the anonymous vendor comments. Someone claiming to work at the florist wrote, We warned her the mother-in-law was the client on all contracts. She said she didn't care. Another from the catering company added, "We tried to explain she couldn't make changes without the payer's consent. She ignored every warning. Piece by piece, the truth came out not through me, but through the people who had seen it all firsthand." Within days, the tide had turned. Posts supporting Lana started disappearing. Her account went private. Noah's profile photo vanished, and the once bragged about dream wedding became the internet's latest cautionary tale. The irony wasn't lost on me. For weeks, I'd been painted as the villain, the bitter, jealous mother who ruined her son's happiness. Now those same people were rewriting the script. Some even called what I did the ultimate power move. But I didn't feel powerful. What I felt was something quieter, steadier justice. Not the kind you chase, but the kind that finds you when you finally stop defending yourself. My sister-in-law Martha called a few days later. Her tone was hesitant, almost embarrassed. "Evelyn, I just wanted to say, I didn't realize how bad it was. We all believed what Lana said." "I'm sorry, I didn't gloat or lecture. I simply said, 'Now you know,' because sometimes that's enough." What struck me most wasn't the gossip itself, but what it revealed. People love a spectacle, but they also crave fairness. When the truth finally breaks through the noise, it doesn't scream, it whispers, and everyone leans in. In the end, I didn't need revenge. The world handled that part for me. The story took on a life of its own, reshaping the narrative I'd been forced into. By the end of the month, Lana had gone silent online. Noah stopped reaching out altogether. Their guest list had shrunk to almost nothing. One by one, their social connections began to fall away. The same people who had once gushed over their engagement now avoided mentioning them at all. The web of appearances they'd worked so hard to build unraveled on its own. And me, I didn't post, defend, or explain. I just lived. Took long walks, slept better, cooked for myself. I didn't have to prove my innocence to anyone. The truth had done it for me. It turns out when people build their happiness on lies, all it takes is a single thread of truth to make the whole thing collapse. That's what justice looks like sometimes. Not dramatic or loud, but quiet and complete. And as their world of fake smiles and wedding hashtags crumbled, mine finally began to rebuild brick by honest brick. Because peace doesn't come from getting even, it comes from being done. One morning I woke to sunlight cutting through the curtains. The house quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. I made coffee, sat by the window, and realized how calm the world could be when you stopped letting other people pull you into their storms. For years, I thought love meant endurance, keeping the peace even when it hurt. But peace built on humiliation isn't peace at all. It's surrender. People like to say family is everything, but that only holds true when family means mutual respect. When love turns into expectation, when generosity turns into entitlement, you're not nurturing connection, you're funding manipulation. That's the hardest lesson I've ever learned. Being alone is not the same as being lonely. Sometimes solitude is freedom in disguise. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to win the narrative. I just needed boundaries. The invisible line between kindness and self-betrayal. Once you draw it, you see things differently. You see how often women are told to be patient, to forgive, to be the bigger person, when what they really need to do is say, enough. Enough pretending money buys respect. Enough carrying people who refuse to stand on their own. Enough shrinking yourself so others can feel comfortable taking from you. When I finally stopped giving out of guilt, I discovered something better than gratitude, peace that wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval. I started gardening again, cooking for myself, reading before bed. The simple thing, the kind that cost nothing but attention. I wasn't healing to prove a point. I was healing because I'd earned the right to stop hurting. Looking back, I can say this with clarity. Kindness is a gift, not a debt. And respect is not something you can buy with money or sacrifice. It's something others either give freely or don't deserve at all. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away before bitterness takes root. If I could leave anyone with one truth, it's this: you can love deeply and still choose yourself. You can give everything once and still decide never to give again to those who took it for granted. That's not selfishness, that's survival. And maybe that's the story so many of us share in one way or another. The moment we finally understand that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. So here's my question for you: if you were in my place, would you have done the same? Tell me your story, because maybe, just maybe, someone else needs to hear it too.